There's no time to waste when it comes to fixing the Denver Broncos linebacker situation. This unit needs stability, and it needs it now. I'm not talking about replacing the heart of this defense, I'm talking about adding reinforcements. Players who can step in, take pressure off, and bring the strength this linebacker room desperately needs. Here's the reality: 3 key linebackers are sidelined with injuries. Jonas Griffith still hasn't stepped onto the field and hasn't practiced since the end of July. Drew Sanders landed on short-term IR after a training camp setback. And Justin Strnad is also banged up, dealing with a foot injury. His situation may be more precautionary, but let's be honest, Denver needs him available, because the rest of the room is running thin. This is why linebacker depth isn't optional anymore, it's critical. For months, some believed the Broncos were fine. Alex Singleton was healthy. Josey Jewell was ready. You had guys like Baron Browning, Nick Bonitto, and others to rotate. But now? That confidence has turned into concern. Suddenly, the argument that Denver doesn't need more help at linebacker feels like a distant memory. The truth is simple: if this defense is going to stand tall, the Broncos must bring in reinforcements. Depth wins in the NFL, and Denver can't afford to gamble on thin numbers at such a crucial position. Here's the bottom line: if the Broncos want to steady this defense, they need to bring in help at inside linebacker, whether through free agency or a trade. Even if Drew Sanders makes his way back, it'll take time for him to regain foot. Released by the Carolina Panthers at this stage of the season, no team is going to hand you an all-pro linebacker without demanding massive trade compensation. That's the reality. So Denver has to be smart. That's why a player like Josey Jewell makes sense: affordable, familiar with the system, and capable of stepping in right away. But he's not the only name worth considering. Let's talk about another intriguing option: Isaiah Simmons. Broncos Country will remember the buzz around Simmons back in the 2020 NFL Draft. Taken 8th overall by the Arizona Cardinals, he was labeled an athletic marvel: size, speed, and strength all packed into one versatile defender. And while his NFL career hasn't lived up to the superstar expectations, the talent is still there. In 5 seasons, Simmons has totaled 329 tackles, showing flashes of the potential that once made him a top 10 pick. Most recently, he was released by the Green Bay Packers during roster cuts this August. On paper, Simmons has everything you'd want in a linebacker: range, explosiveness, and physicality. He's the kind of player who could thrive if given the right role and coaching. For Denver, even if he started on the practice squad, his raw athleticism alone makes him worth a look. Sometimes, the best solutions aren't about chasing big names, they're about finding the right fit. And Isaiah Simmons could be exactly that for this Broncos defense. Isaiah Simmons is the definition of raw athleticism. A 4.39 40-yard dash. A 39-inch vertical. A 6 feet 4 inches, 238-pound frame that moves like a defensive back. That combination is almost unheard of. The Packers gave him a shot at linebacker during camp, where he recorded 19 tackles and a couple of stops on special teams in the preseason. But inconsistency in coverage held him back, and Green Bay, now one of the NFL's strongest rosters, decided to move on. Still, the tools Simmons brings are undeniable. You simply can't teach that kind of speed and size. And knowing Vance Joseph's preference for athletic, versatile defenders, Simmons feels like the kind of gamble worth taking. Yes, the production has dipped recently. In 2024, he played a rotational role, finishing with just 21 tackles. But look back to 2022 with the Arizona Cardinals, when he was a full-time starter: 99 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 7 passes defended. Those numbers don't lie. With the right role and coaching, this is a player who can impact games. For Denver, Simmons doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't need to lock down elite tight ends in coverage. What the Broncos need is someone who can hold the middle, stuff the run, and add pressure when called upon. And in that role, Simmons could thrive. That's why, out of all the options, he's my top choice. In Denver's linebacker rotation, Simmons could realistically deliver 60-plus tackles, a handful of tackles for loss, and even some sacks. He may not be a flawless solution, but he has the potential to bring exactly what this defense is missing: speed, strength, and impact in the middle of the field. And here's the kicker with Isaiah Simmons: you wouldn't even need to break the bank. At this stage, a veteran minimum deal could get it done. For a player of his athletic caliber, that's a gamble worth taking. If Simmons wants another chance to prove himself, what better place than Mile High, under Vance Joseph's defense? But Simmons isn't the only option on the table. Let's shift gears and talk about another possibility, one that could change the outlook of this entire linebacker room. Tremaine Edmunds. Out of everyone on this list, Edmunds is without question the most talented linebacker. Currently with the Chicago Bears, he's a former first-round pick who has been one of the league's most consistent and physical defenders since entering the NFL. At 6 feet 5 inches with sideline-to-sideline range, he's the type of player who instantly elevates a defense. For Denver, trading for Edmunds wouldn't come cheap. It would require serious draft capital or player compensation. But when you're talking about stabilizing the middle of the field and adding a proven difference maker, Edmunds is exactly the kind of linebacker who could turn weaknesses into strengths. Now, let's be real about the Chicago Bears. That franchise looks like it's heading straight for a fire sale. They're collapsing, and when a team falls apart like that, players who were once untouchable suddenly become available. That's where Tremaine Edmunds comes in. Coming out of college, Edmunds was hyped as a future All-Pro. Has he reached that level? No. But let's be clear, he's been a steady starter every single season of his career. He may not dominate every snap, but he's proven himself as a reliable linebacker who can anchor a defense. So far in 2025, his production hasn't been spectacular: 14 tackles and 1 tackle for loss, but Edmunds remains the type of player who can do a little bit of everything. He can set the edge. He can step up against the run. He can drop back into coverage. He's not elite in any single category, but his size, length, and athletic instincts give him the versatility defensive coordinators crave. The pros are obvious: rare length, rangy athleticism, and flashes of high-level coverage ability. The con? Consistency. Edmunds doesn't dominate every play, and that's what's kept him from reaching true All-Pro status. But here's the question Broncos Country needs to ask: do you want a linebacker who can do everything well, or are you willing to gamble on specialists who only thrive in one area? With Denver's linebacker depth under fire, a player like Edmunds could bring the balance this defense desperately needs. The truth about Tremaine Edmunds is simple: while he has the size and instincts to be effective, he hasn't fully lived up to his contract in Chicago. At times, he's slow to diagnose plays, and his lapses in coverage can be costly. But that's also why he could be available for a bargain, maybe a 5th or 6th round pick. For Denver, that's not a bad price for a linebacker who can still start alongside Alex Singleton if needed. And then there's one more option already inside the building: Lavell Bailey. Bailey impressed in the preseason and showed flashes of exactly what this defense could use: steady coverage skills. He might not be a blitzing force, but the Broncos already have Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonitto, Zach Allen, Jonah Ellis, and others to attack the quarterback. What Bailey brings is something different: reliability in coverage, the kind of linebacker who can match up in space and help balance out the defense. So why not elevate him? Why not give him a real shot on the 53-man roster and let him grow into a bigger role? Sometimes the best solution isn't outside the building, it's right in front of you. But here's the bottom line: whether it's Josey Jewell, Isaiah Simmons, Tremaine Edmunds, or Lavell Bailey, the Broncos cannot afford to sit back and wait. Injuries won't magically disappear. Hoping that Dre Greenlaw or Drew Sanders suddenly returns at full strength is wishful thinking. By then, it might be too late. If Denver wants to compete, they have to act. The time is now. Don't react when the season is slipping away, get aggressive, make the move, and solidify this linebacker room before it's too late.